Dallas. You gave here in Tallinn at the European Space Week space economics roundtable discussion very good thoughts on the satellite market, future trends globally. Can you please elaborate some of the points that you just discussed about that subject?
Yeah, certainly. So a lot of the panel today was looking at the difference between technology and industry. So the difference between developing a product and actually selling that product to customers. There's a lot of talk of what we can do with the technology, but there doesn't seem to be always a lot of talk of how do we create a product that can sell, that can generate revenues.
What would be the next step to fill the gap?
The next step is having processes that can do something with the data that the satellite is giving you. It sounds obvious, but a lot of people worry so much about having a high resolution, a big fancy satellite, when really you can do a lot with smaller satellites, you can do a lot with more frequent data. So the next step is the processing. So are you collecting a large amount of imagery, and are you turning it into some kind of service? You can use a low resolution image and people might not think it has any value, but if you use a lot of low resolution images, you can create a big data analytics solution. You can take a lot of imagery and you can stack it on top of itself and you can analyze changes in order to deliver a product that is not as feasible with a big satellite or a big high-resolution solution.
Can you please give some examples of potential applications, what might be there?
So we've seen a few here this week at European Space Week. We've seen some of the competitors and the winners come up with these really interesting ideas in terms of using a drone to take imagery or using a satellite to take imagery of forest fires, for example. And they're starting to look at this now, but the next step is how do we turn that into a business? So the idea is you have to have some kind of technological, analytical solution that can take that imagery that you're accessing and you can apply it to a specific field such as forest fires. And then the next step is who's going to pay for that information and how. So governments are a good example, and subscription services. So one very concrete example for you. You develop an idea that says we're going to look at images and extract information about forest fires. That's a great idea. You then turn it, and that's what one of the groups is doing actually, is you take that information and you put it on an application. And then a customer can say, I will pay you a certain amount of money a year. I will get an app on my phone or my computer that says, warning, there's forest fires in this area, in this location. And that customer is willing to pay for that service because they need that information, and they don't care how they get it. They just want the insights. They want the analytics. So the short answer is examples would include analytics-based applications, data platforms where you take the data and you put it in an easy place to access or sort, but it's a little bit more complicated is when you can integrate that process. So that instead of having it developed onto a map or some kind of application, you have statistics feeding into machines and other products.
In terms of certain opportunities for small startup-sized companies, do you have some recommendations for companies like this?
My recommendations would be, if you're coming up with an innovative idea, does it solve a customer's problem? If it does solve a problem, who are these customers? How much would they be willing to pay? What kind of service would they pay for? Do they just want a single project? There's a lot of just single project work here in Europe. Or do they want a subscription over a period of time? Think about these kinds of things and create an actual business case. Create a business model, business plan, and present that to investors. Because investors get ideas, they don't get projections. They get a lot of ideas about how satellites can do things, but they don't get a good understanding from a lot of these emerging companies as to how much money they need, how much they expect to make, who are the competitors. So just a little bit more market knowledge is an application of that market knowledge is the next step. And I've seen a lot of investors who become a lot more interested, even on a small scale. If you can show them what revenues you think you might make or who your competitors are, that goes a long way to actually receiving the funding you need to drive your business forward.
Thank you, Dallas, for this insight and good thoughts at the panel as well.
And thank you very much.